Hello everyone. Welcome to the last session of the day, F1, the CTP showcase. My name is Louis Greenwell. I'll be the moderator for today's final session. And with me today, we have Whit Montague with Arkansas, and she's going to talk to us about their CTP program.
Thank you. Looking forward to it. We'll be talking about our base level engineering workshop and how we use it to get the word out about additional flood risk data and getting people to integrate it into their day-to-day floodplain management.
Hi, welcome to our presentation today on making risk information more available and usable through the Cooperating Technical Partners Program. We have several folks here to help present today. We're going to go over who those speakers are, as well as an overview of the CTP program and its connection to the National Mitigation Investment Strategy, as well as the presentations and innovations you're going to see, and then some CTP innovations for how they have shared and communicated risk information. The speakers that you'll have today are myself. My name is Laura Algeo. I'm with the Risk Management Directorate with FEMA. We also have Whit Montague, who's with the Arkansas Natural Resources Division. We have Sean Penman with the University of New Mexico and their Earth Data Analytics Analysis Center. And then Daryl Rockfield, who's with the Missouri State Emergency Management Agency. So first of all, an overview of the CTP program. The CTP program is a competitive grant program. It really works to enhance partnerships between FEMA and other NFIP communities and contributors. So it can be regional, state, local, nonprofit organizations that work with FEMA to advance the National Flood Insurance Program. The role can be manifested through a couple of different ways. There's some tasks and activities that may be done, from flood risk projects to letter of map revision reviews, program management, and community outreach and mitigation strategies. These partnerships can really produce innovative and data-driven tools and resources that really make their communities much more risk aware and can help to drive and incentivize mitigation within their communities. The CTP program is also in line with the National Mitigation Investment Strategy. This is a strategy that was developed in 2019 and published, which provides information on how, from a national scale, we can coordinate mitigation investments and disaster resilience and make those priorities in nations across the, in communities across the nation. Today, a lot of the examples that we're going to hear about, most especially align to recommendation 2.1 under recommendation 2, which is making risk information more available and easier to use. A lot of the things and terminology that you may hear during the presentation today surface around interactive maps, floodplain management portals, different map viewers that are out there, innovative tailored outreach, the development of topographic information for use and modeling, as well as many more. One of the main things you'll hear about also through two of the presentations is base level engineering. Base level engineering is an automated way that FEMA is using to develop some innovative products and communicate risk information in a more broad term. It really generates watershed-wide flood hazard information utilizing hydrology and hydraulics, providing boundaries as well as flood depth, water surface elevation grids, and it can be provided and shared in a lot of different ways, which can lead towards making the information more available and accessible to communities. It helps. Some of the key benefits are providing a comprehensive picture of that flood risk across an entire watershed for an area, providing modeling to support the different mitigation strategies and projects that communities may want to undertake, supporting local planning and development decisions, as well as advising local and regional emergency planning and response operations, and really enhancing local risk communication initiatives, providing different ways to tailor that message and tailor the information to communities that have this risk and are getting this information. So next, let's really hear about some of these innovations and where we're making this risk information more available and usable to folks. First off, we have Whit Montague.
Good afternoon. I am Whit Montague. I am the state NFIP coordinator for the state of Arkansas. The state of Arkansas is bounded on the west by the Mississippi River and is bisected from the northwest to the southeast by the Arkansas River, bringing with it 150,000 square miles of drainage. And for those reasons, we are very interested and invested in understanding the flood risk in our communities. We are so invested that we have been partners in the CTP program since 2011, and we have deployed base level engineering data in more than 50% of our HUC 8 watersheds. We're excited about it. It's lots of pretty pictures, lots of wonderful data. But what we're finding is that when we go to the communities and we're sharing this data with our floodplain administrators and with our county judges and our mayors, that it's often a case of talking to them. They're excited, they are grateful to be part of a community-driven effort, but the information is not sticking. So instead we said, let's come up with a conversational approach that has more long-term implications for them using and committing to the use of this base level engineering data as they go throughout the year, throughout time, looking at strategies to mitigate flood risk in their communities. We came up with a series of base level engineering workshops. These base level engineering workshops were deployed as part of the state floodplain administrator training, which all NFIP communities are required to attend, and it focused on using hands-on use of the base level engineering data so that when they left the workshop, they had a good understanding of how to use it. We had a series of case studies. Many of these case studies focused on rural communities because Arkansas is a very rural state with more than 80% of our communities being less than 5,000 people in size. We provided them with the basic information that would be provided during a floodplain management inquiry. And then we had them sit together in small groups and access traditional flood risk data to come up with what we like to say their dog in the fight. Where is their responsibility with respect to floodplain development management? In these small groups, they then went and they accessed the less traditional base level engineering data, looking at it to determine how is this of use in their strategy, how can they use this to look at flood risk for this particular situation. They also worked as a small group to say, here's the information, what does it mean, how do we understand it? And furthermore, how can we leverage this to really help the applicant for the floodplain development permit, the community CEOs understand flood risk in a very real manner. And then the final goal for the group was to come up with a strategy for how you would actually regulate this particular situation. We deployed 5 of the cases in each workshop, a minimum of 5 different cases, some of them very rural, some of them suburban cases for them to work together in these small groups of 3 to 5 people. There were a series of 12 workshops offered each year as part of the state floodplain administrator training, and these workshops were 4 hours each. In 1 year through this program, we were able to reach more than 150 NFIP communities in Arkansas. We have 424 communities altogether. And what we found is that they were able to build a network of communities so that it's not only the state coming forward with information, but they were committed to it because during the workshops, they built a network of community to community within the watershed. They built a network with the state. We gave them tools to help them better understand how to use it so that when they left, it wasn't something that they just had to pull up out of the air and try to remember. And also, we leverage the information. We're finding that these communities are excited and they're using it and they're incorporating it into their local codes, expanding what the locally regulated special flood hazard area is, They're using it to identify mitigation options, to build stronger hazard mitigation plans, to look at repetitive loss analysis and substantial damage strategies. And we're finding that with this, that they're better able to communicate risk and that they're also able to engage their community in not only reactive floodplain management, but proactive floodplain management.
Great, thank you, Whit. Next up, we have New Mexico with Sean Penman sharing some things that they've done in their state.
Good afternoon. My name is Sean Penman, and I work at the Earth Data Analysis Center at the University of New Mexico. We've been a CTP, the New Mexico CTP, since 2012. New Mexico is a very large state. We have 121,000 square miles with just over 2 million people, and most of the population lives along in four large communities along the Rio Grande. We have elevations ranging from 2,800 feet to over 13,000 feet. And contrary to popular opinion, this is not what New Mexico looks like. We don't have any saguaros in New Mexico. We have a large portion of the state owned by federal and tribal entities, with 44%, only 44% of the state is privately owned. One of the issues we face in New Mexico is that 10 of our counties either have no maps or only have paper maps that map only a very small portion of the county. One of our first projects as a CTP was taking those old paper maps, digitizing them, and creating interactive online maps for the communities, where we added not only the areas of the flood boundaries, but also community centers, schools, local resources, and if the local floodplain managers had any data, we added it to the website for them so that they could access this information in their offices and in their communities. We also have a centralized portal called NM Flood, where we post all the information about the current CTP projects, the base level engineering projects, links to our interactive maps, other kind of special projects that we've done across the state. And one of the things that we're most excited about in New Mexico is by the end of this year, we'll have statewide LiDAR. So with a collaboration between FEMA and NRCS, we will have QL level 2 LiDAR for the entire state, which opens up a wide range of possibilities for us in New Mexico, because most of our old, our DFIRMs were based on the old 10-meter USGS DEMs. As you can see on the screen, they're not really great resolution. So the new QL2 LiDAR DEMs are greatly going to improve our knowledge of flood risk in New Mexico. So when we do a base level engineering project in New Mexico, we have a minimum purchase. We have a variety of engineering models that are run, estimated flood extents, water surface grids, estimated flood depth grids. And then one of the other additional purchases we do is a level 2 hazards analysis, which is more than most of the communities in New Mexico have. When they do their hazard mitigation plans, they often do like a level 1 analysis, but this is a more advanced. So it's going to be a very useful tool for communities in New Mexico. And then in Region 6, we have, the region has put together a estimated base flood elevation viewer, where communities can access all this information. They can see which watersheds have been analyzed. They can download all the data, all the models. They can do a property lookup to look at the flood risk at particular addresses. This is very valuable for New Mexico. Most of the communities in New Mexico are very poor, and being able to already have these HEC-RAS models for download, they don't have to do the upfront investment in these modeling when they're doing community projects, is incredibly valuable for the many communities in New Mexico. And also the watershed approach is very helpful in New Mexico. I was looking at the NFHL data one day, and on one side of the county line, it's a very nice AE flood zone, and then directly on the other side, it's a much broader A zone floodplain. And so if we analyze it at a watershed area, we wouldn't have this discrepancy on either side of a county boundary. So we're not approaching 50% of the coverage like Arkansas does. But we are approaching, you know, some actual significance in New Mexico, and the local floodplain managers are starting to understand what BLE can bring them and starting to ask, like, when are you going to come to my community? So now we have people asking us to come instead of just picking them based on our own criteria. We did our first BLE project in 2017, and we're going to start another one this year in October. And in addition to the base level engineering, we as the CTP provide some other LiDAR derived products. We have been deriving building footprints from the same LiDAR that the base level engineering was done on. We've also been in areas in communities in the mountains. We've been creating defensible space polygons around the building footprint. So in areas where there's a high risk of wildfire, the communities can then go in and do an analysis of where people need to clear more defensible space. And we also do a reduced space, a defensible space and reduced fuel zone layer for them also. For example, this is in Ruidoso down in the Rio Hondo watershed in southern New Mexico. We also do a couple of other products. We do vegetation canopy and impervious surfaces, 5 and 10 foot contours, hill shade, slope, and aspect. And all these products are very useful to our local communities. In addition, when they use them in conjunction with the base level engineering. So if you have any questions, please, I think there's a question and answer period at the time. Please ask them then. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sean. Next up, we have Daryl Rockfield with the Missouri State Emergency Management Agency. Daryl, I think you're on mute.
Okay. Hi, my name is Daryl Rockfield with the State Emergency Management Agency. I'm the project manager for floodplain mapping here in Missouri. And today I'm just going to show you guys what we outreach, how we outreach, and where we hope to take our outreach in Missouri. Here's a basic look at our floodplain users portal. Taking a look at the mini map, you can see that any of the counties that are not blue or gray are currently counties that we're working in. And a few years ago, we only had a handful of counties that we're actually doing risk map updates for. The amount of counties is roughly 3/4 of the state. And back in 2017, we desperately needed a way to be able to organize and manage all of our outreach that we were doing for the state. And that came for tuition when we developed our draft map viewer in 2017, and it maintained by our consultants and kind of was our housing outreach for draft maps and everything along with it. But we decided to expand on that. Over the past year and a half, we developed a portal, and the design of the site was built around floodplain administrators, new or old, looking to achieve an update on the remapping process, as well as being able to access all the data and resources with a few clicks and not being able to take too much time away from them. Here's a look at what our draft map viewer provides. You can also make comments, change the imagery. We also have housing points from MSDIS. They have structured data specific that we overlay with our floodplain mapping, so you can get relative accuracies with amount of houses in our proposed maps, as well as the changes from the previous maps to the new. Let's see. Here's our workshops. We host quite a few workshops between our stakeholders and floodplain administrators, and we try and teach them how to identify and use the data within the 2D models, as well as the flood risk products. And hopefully we can still do these in person, but obviously with the COVID thing, it's making it a little harder to make them in person. So virtual workshops will be something that we'll be looking at, but again, we hope to be able to do them in person. One of our newest additions to the flood risk products are freeboard grids. And I specifically want to talk about those for a little bit. They're great for having structures built to the same level of protection and an ordinance that is stricter than the federal minimum standard of the 1% annual chance. This grid provides a way that communicates properties outside of the 1% annual chance within that 1 foot, 2 foot, or 3 foot rise. And it also provides great communication of your risk outside of the 1% annual chance. Let's see. We also have a flood risk product quick guide that we include with these. And it really, if you have GIS capabilities, it allows you to go in and check out the data and be able to identify and manipulate the data. It's not really a quick guide since it's 40 pages, and we hope to shorten it in the future. And we think it's a good step forward and maybe a temporary solution for the time being, as we hope to be able to publish the flood risk products on a website viewer in the near future, probably a year and a half or so. But this does allow anybody with GIS capabilities to access the data and information within the flood risk products. This portal allows us to submit project data, allows our stakeholders to submit project data regarding pump designs or flooding pictures, and attach a location-specific point to it so our modelers can take that data and be able to know exactly where it's located at. And it cuts out a lot of the email traffic that we have to do and ask questions, and it kind of asks those questions for you, keeps all organized, and makes it a very easy way for stakeholders to communicate with us. Model request. This used to be a very tedious process, used to be a really long 2 or 3 page form, have to have questions back and forth if we didn't include just the right information. It was very hard for stakeholders to get the models they needed to be able to do risk reduction solutions within the state of Missouri. And with this new form, it's a real quick 30-second survey, I guess you would call it, in order to be able to obtain that information. And it's a good record as well, because you can export all the Excel file documents associated with these. This is a list and view of the kind of documents you can view on our outreach site. We maintain everything from our meetings to the flood risk product quick guide to the modeling methods maps, and it's all available on the site. So we kind of keep it there. So if new stakeholders come in or our office gets switched around, then they have access to all the information that we previously handed out, and we can get them caught up to speed pretty quick. We have 2 different forms of public outreach that we do quarterly. We have our quarterly newsletter, which references Missouri as mapping and programmatic as a state, and we send that out to all our stakeholders within all our projects. And we also have a quarterly county outreach or status update, where we give county specific information to all of our stakeholders within the project and give them a checklist of what's happened, what's to come, and kind of just a general overview of where they're at in the county. We also have an admin comment layer, and this is used internally between our hazard mitigation division, our NFIP coordinator, and as well as the mapping and engineering section. And it kind of just gives us general information of what each of the programs is doing within the state and each of the counties, because the counties expect us to know what information is, what everybody else is doing when we go and have meetings with them. And this is a good way to record all that, and because sometimes we don't have time to have meetings every 2 to 3 weeks to go over this stuff and what we're actually doing with the other agencies. So this is a good record of keeping for interagency action. So with that, thank you guys, and any questions?
Yeah, I want to say a big thanks to Whit, Sean, and Daryl for not only being here to present and share this information with everybody today, but also for taking on these activities and really creating these really innovative ideas and ways to reach out to their communities so that they better understand the risk and the mitigation opportunities available to them at that local level. We will have a document that you'll be able to download as well that provides some links and more information, so you can hopefully take some of these ideas back to your community and hopefully implement some of them. And with that, I'll turn it over to Q&A. Thank you. Good morning and welcome to our session entitled Incorporating the 2020 Survey and RMD Priorities to Inform the Cooperating Technical Partners Program. This session is going to go over the survey that we just recently sent out to our partners in 2020 to all CTP partners to get feedback on how the CTP program is doing and some of the objectives and goals of the program, and make sure that we are on the right course to ensure success of the program and ensure success in local communities. So we want to provide some of the highlights and information from this survey and discuss some of our upcoming steps for incorporating the results into the future direction of the CTP program. So we haven't dived completely into all of the results as yet. We just finished the survey very recently, within the last month. And so we've started to pull together some of the information, but we haven't provided the full in-depth analysis. As I'll mention later in the meeting, I'll talk a little bit about some of those steps. This type of survey was last administered in 2015. In fact, that was the first time that we had actually initiated a survey to the CTP community. And the feedback survey really gave us an idea, a capability of really trying to understand some of the reflections from the CTP users in the community out as a whole. So we evaluated the program structure, its effectiveness, really looked to identify strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities. And it helped us prioritize initiatives that we've been working on for the last 5 years. We started and developed a 5-year strategy aligned to FEMA and the Risk Management Directorate goals, but also building on those things that the CTP community had provided to us. So we wanted to go through, it had been 5 years, and we wanted to go through and provide another survey to the CTP community. This one was done through from February through April. We've been taking the results since the survey closed and sharing information and trying to pull that information together. We did have over 100 or about 130 survey responses, and the survey focused on really trying to understand the demographics of what types of partners and diversity we have across the regions and across the organization. It helped us identify some potential tools, resources, training, and maybe process improvements that might need to be done. Focusing on building on what we started in 2015 and really seeing where we need to continue to go. Also talked about defining and measuring success, trying to look at the program as a whole and see how we can improve the CTP program, roll out training and opportunities that we provide in order to measure success appropriately and identify success for our local communities, and giving us some direction for the future of RiskMap related to the CTP program. So I want to dive into some of the results that we have. Again, these are some of the preliminary results, and we will provide more information later. 131 total responses. More than 50% of those responses came from regions 4, 5, and 6, where we do have a large number of CTP communities. And nearly 70% of all of the CTP respondents in the survey do currently have an actively funded project. So that means that the folks that are providing impact, are providing input, are ones who are actively using the program and going forward with implementing programs in their communities. So you can see just sort of on the right-hand side is some information and demographics. We did get responses from every region, some with obviously more attendance than others. A lot of those are the ones that have more CTPs and more projects ongoing. So it does make sense that we would see some diversity across that. Looking in some of the results, you can see here, the thing that stands out to me is the bar chart on your left-hand side of the screen, which talks about the number of years as a CTP that people responded. So you can see that the majority of the responders for this survey had more than 10 years of experience in the CTP program. So I think that's great, and it really gives us a lot of information that the industry knowledge and those folks that are really invested in the success and the effectiveness of the program were the ones participating. And the information on the right just sort of indicates that, you know, nearly 44% of the responses did come from state governments, and those are the most prevalent CTPs across the nation. So again, that makes kind of sense. We had some feedback also from FEMA, some of the contract support to CTPs, some institutions of higher learning, as well as some nonprofits and other city and township governments, city, township, county governments. So we had a broad diversity of folks that were providing feedback on this particular survey. As we started to make some questions around the tools, training, and resources, we really got some good feedback related to what are some of the most useful things and what are some of the least useful things that we currently provide. And so the upper left-hand corner in green talks about some of those most useful tools. And people really have highlighted that the webinars and the recorded trainings are really helpful. Having that CTP collaboration monthly newsletter that goes out and provides feedback on some of the current events and ongoing things that are out there, as well as initiatives and programs that they need to be aware of. And then third was best practices, templates, and other guidance. So getting that other guidance, those other guidance documents out and providing more templates and best practices for folks to be able to utilize in their communities was seen as very useful. On the least useful side, we have the Collaboration Center discussion board, some of the working groups, and the CTP annual snapshot. And I think some of that's just people potentially not involved in some of those things. The discussion board really leads us to start to think about better ways that we can maybe offer some walkthroughs or demos, maybe add some tutorial buttons, or try to make some improvements on how users are made aware of updates and changes on the system. I just don't think people have had the ability to dive as deeply into some of that. If you look at the bar chart or the pie chart on the right-hand side, it talks about the utilization of that collaboration center as a whole. And we do see, you know, the majority of folks are using it rather infrequently. So, you know, once or twice a year for about 50% of the folks, once per month, and 2 to 3 times a month gets us to about 40% of our, 35 to 40% of our users. So we've got a strong subset of folks that are using the information, but a lot of folks are really only looking at it rather infrequently. So we want to take a look at maybe some ways to increase people's awareness of updates and changes there. As far as knowledge, skills, and abilities, which is the blue on the lower left, or in the box on the left, you see some of the top 4 things that were identified there were really related to engineering, technical components, the MIP, project management, grants management, communication, outreach. So those are things that folks want to hear more about, which is really helpful for us to really drive how we develop our future live webinars, especially in that relation to the mapping and technical pieces. Project management and communication obviously seem to be very, very helpful and sought after. And then in the gray box, it talks about 3 actions we can improve management and effectiveness, and that gets to providing more clarity on the performance measures, which are something new and are something that has come up recently. Since 2015, and we've been trying to get to more progress on those, but getting more clarity out about those components is what folks would like to hear, as well as assisting and providing more communication opportunities with the regions and improving feedback opportunities from CTPs to the regions and or headquarters. So giving just more opportunities for those touch points and being able to reach out to their FEMA points of contact and coordinate. This slide starts to talk to some of the numbers and some of the things that people started really discussing relative to the performance measurement and defining success. So if you see the number on the left, it's 92%. We asked folks what they thought, how their organization was doing, and did they feel it was successful in the programs that they're implementing. And 92% of the respondents said that they thought that they were being very successful. They thought that project success was improving maps and technical data, improving communications, increasing capacity and efficiency for resource utilization, and having a stronger partnership with FEMA and communities. These are all things that we strive for in the CTP program, and those are what they felt were the key indicators of that success. 40%, however, found that it was difficult to accurately characterize their project success. So it's really using the current program measures and objectives. They felt like the successes that they were seeing didn't necessarily fit one-to-one into the performance and program measures that we currently have. So they were really looking to, increase flexibility in reporting, make reporting more reflective of all project types, increase training and guidance on reporting. And so these are all things that we're working on as well. And understanding where some of those shortfalls are is very helpful to make those decisions on areas that we need to improve. And then lastly, 10% felt that 10% had worked with their regions, identified that they'd worked with their regions to really better reflect performance measures. So working with the regional metric coordination to get more FEMA regional staff participation at CTP meetings and with their decision making, better FEMA CTP coordination to tailor those generic measures into CTP projects to make them more useful, and scheduling touch points to discuss performance and challenges. So, you know, while we see unanimous agreement basically that participation is successful, many of the respondents appear to feel kind of stuck with some of the performance measures that they don't think maybe accurately reflect success. Certainly there might be a gap in how they define success and how we're looking to measure performance, but also an even fewer number actually went to that next step to work with their regions to try to better define those measures. So that's definitely something that we need to continue to work on and focus on as we move forward. On this slide, we talk a little bit about the future vision of the CTP program and risk map, and how FEMA is looking into the future flood risk data and some of the changes that may come to the program. You can see on the left, you know, A, B, C, and D are sort of the 4 main goals of the future flood risk data, which is getting to modernizing the delivery and management of our flood risk data, shifting from binary to graduated, ensuring significant and appropriate role for the private sector and public sector, and increasing access to flood hazard data to improve resulting action. So really get to the meat of making sure communities are informed and capable of taking and enabled to take actions to mitigate their risks. And we had 80% of the respondents really view this as an opportunity, the future flood risk data as an opportunity for greater CTP involvement, or they want to learn more about getting involved and understand what that means and how they could potentially get involved. So it seems like it's a good path going forward. The elements that the CTPs you can see in the pie chart, you know, they want to be more engaged in. Really, that shifting from binary to graduated risk is where you see a lot of that. So I think looking at how we can deliver our data in different ways and share it with communities so they better understand the data obviously seems to be a common theme above where FEMA is looking to go, as well as it sounds like from the CTP's objectives and goals as well. We also asked for some candid feedback, and we highlighted a few of those in the upper right-hand corner, really to talk about some of the things that they would like to see us do as we move forward. And I won't go too much into those because I know we're limited on time, but we'll have more of this as we produce our report ultimately and be able to share a lot of these candid points. But the idea being that we really did get some good feedback on ways that folks could really interact with the products and possibly identify changes for the products. The second bullet down there really talks about how, as we're pivoting to the future, we ask CTPs, if we had increases in funding or if we had decreases in funding, what would that mean to your program and what would your program look like in that respect? And so on the left, it talks about if we had increased funding, and on the right, it talks about we have decreased funding. So the first one, if there was more funding, people would do, develop flood risk profiles and more flood risk products. Instead of focusing just on the hazard, they'd look a lot at the risk, developing and maintaining tools to better share the hazard, and increasing that awareness and communication training to communities. Alternatively, on the right-hand side, as we talk about if there were decreased fundings, the number one thing was that hazard risk awareness, communication, and training to communities. Also program management and program maintenance and in-person meetings to get the firm data, the flood insurance rate map data rolled out to communities. So you see the number 3 and number 1 highlighted there because whether we had increased funding or decreased funding, it was obviously apparent to all the CTP communities and stakeholders that did the survey that it is an extremely critical point and part of the process is really increasing that awareness and communication and training to communities so they can better understand the data that they have. So some of the things that we're looking to do as we shift to the future, really modernizing this information, the management and deliverance of the data to communities. We need sound management practices that increase transparency and operational efficiency, all while being aligned to our statutes and regulations. And the CTP program is really embracing these strategic drivers from the future of flood risk data, as well as feedback from the stakeholders to actively identify and implement where we have exemplary programs and policies, and improve the efficiency and effectiveness of the program. So, we are working on a few of these things I mentioned throughout some of those examples. We're talking about or developing a CTP performance reporting tool, trying to make it easier and better to understand how those performance measures work, while still offering flexibility so the regions can still work with CTPs to input the measures that mean something to them and show the successes of their program. We're continually offering new training, webinars, independent study courses, working with EMI on some different opportunities for some learning hubs, a mentoring program. And we'll be going through, the development of the new 5-year operations plan, because we're at the end of the one that we started in 2016 after and based on the results of that 2015 survey. So we have a lot of work to do. We've done a lot over the last 5 years, and we still have some things to do to make sure that the program is successful. Some of the next things that we need to do based on the results of this survey, as I mentioned, we want to go through and do that full SWOT analysis, looking at the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats related to the program, and really understand how to better utilize that data in order to make some decisions going forward. We also want to identify, any other gaps and enhancements that might be needed based on changes in people's opinions from the 2015 survey to the 2020 survey. We want to obviously finish up the report based on the survey and share that information with all of the CTP community stakeholders. We plan to share it at our next community of practice, so definitely be on the lookout for the invitations to the community of practice, and of course it will be out on the collaboration site available for you to look into. And we're going to work collaboratively with the user community and the community of practice to develop and get buy-in on that operations plan, including any new short, mid, and long-term goals that we incorporate into that particular report. So with that, that's really touches on the surface of the things that we have looked at to date with the survey. Until we get a deeper dive into that and are able to provide more information, we'll open it up for any questions now, and thank you. Have a great day.
Laura, thanks for that presentation. We don't have any, I'm watching the questions over on the side, but I had a question for you. I saw during your presentation, you talked about one of the least favorite or least utilized features were the group discussions or the group meetings. That surprises me, because it seems like when you talk about communication, people want more of that face-to-face. Why do you think they rated that so low?
I have a feeling that that's linked a bit more to the numbers of people that were actually taking the survey versus the number of people that can be involved in the working group. And so folks that aren't directly involved with the working group probably don't see it as a big benefit to them on a day-to-day, thinking sort of existentially about it as far as the outcomes that come from that working group improve the process. But sort of just that being involved in a working group is probably on the magnitude of maybe 20 or so CTPs across the different working groups versus, 130 folks that took the survey. So I just have a feeling that's how the numbers played out.
Maybe that makes sense. Well, are there any other things that you want to underscore or reiterate about the presentation?
I think the main thing is just for folks to stay engaged and stay a part of it. We have a lot of tools and resources that we have available. We have a lot of information on the collaboration site. If you haven't been to it, definitely take a look. Let us know if you need to get access to it. If you're a CTP or you work for a CTP, you can have access to that site, and you can see a lot of the different best practices and tools and resources that we have there. We also have the community of practice meeting that we have twice a year for the entire CTP community. So make sure that you're on the mailing list so that you get that information, as well as our monthly newsletter that we send out. So we have a lot of ways to try to share information, just try to make sure that you're connected to that. And as we dive deeper into the results from the survey and get a little bit more meat behind what we're able to review, we'll definitely be updating that information and sharing that most likely at the next biannual community practice meeting.
That sounds great. Again, Laura, thank you for being a presenter today. And I guess we'll start the next meeting.
Hi, I'm Emily
let's see,
Wingo.
our last meeting of the day, our last presentation of the day is
Hi, I'm Shannon
Brewer
with Dewberry Engineers.
Dewberry.
And I'm Monica Risco with Atkins.
And this is the Georgia CTP strategy. As part of the Cooperating Technical Partner Agreement with FEMA, the Georgia Environmental Protection Division, or EPD, under the Department of Natural Resources, is facilitating the implementation of FEMA's risk map effort through its Georgia Flood Map, or Mapping, Assessment, and Planning program. As part of Georgia Flood Map, we will have flown statewide LIDAR by 2020 and delivered by 2022. Currently, we have 41,470 stream miles in our inventory. Approximately 43% of the miles in the inventory are unverified and need updated or new modeling. Adopting a combination of base level engineering and full risk map studies up to the 1 square mile drainage area limit, we will drastically increase mileage in our inventory and provide our communities with a much better view of all the flooding risk. We will do this while keeping our valid inventory at or above 85% for the state. The EPD vision for Georgia Flood Map is to provide a statewide program that not only delivers more accurate and complete flood hazard information for our counties and municipalities within the state, but also provides information and tools to assist communities in developing more comprehensive mitigation plans that will reduce losses from flooding. That's 577 communities that participate in the National Flood Insurance Program and approximately 76 communities with mapped special flood hazard area still not participating. 231 communities have received effective risk map projects, and 201 communities have active risk map projects. Next slide. We will have identified the drivers for Georgia Map, such as FEMA metrics, the statewide LIDAR acquisition, and the population receiving risk map products. From there, we developed the goals, including increasing NFIP participation, educating and creating a more flood risk aware and responsible society, and encouraging greater acceptance of modeling and resulting mapping and flood risk products. These drivers and goals facilitate the development of a robust communication and outreach program.
So as you can see, Georgia has a lot of communities and a lot of active projects covering a lot of those communities right now. And that's pretty much been the trend for a while now. So they needed to design an approach that would get community officials on board earlier in the process and stay engaged throughout the process and have the tools and resources to inform their constituents as well. So most of you guys who are tuning in are probably familiar with FEMA's risk map lifecycle and the minimum required community engagement points, such as discovery meeting, flood risk review, final CCO meeting with possibly an open house, and a resilience meeting. Well, Georgia has introduced and woven in a lot more steps throughout that process. It's comprised of more community meetings, as well as documentation and tools and resources for the communities to use throughout the process. And we'll delve into each of those a little bit more throughout the presentation. So let's start off with the kickoff meetings. As you guys probably know, the discovery meeting is usually, a year or two or more before you get to initiating a risk map project. So Georgia wanted to be able to bring everybody back together again since that time has passed, and introduce, get any new folks on board, familiar with the project, recap all the discussions that happened during discovery that has led to the proposed scope, and also use this as an opportunity to share the proposed engineering methods with the communities. Certain communities have preferences on the models, and certain areas are more suited for certain types of modeling. So we just want to make sure that the communities are approved of the methods that we're going to use. We also use this as an opportunity to discuss different kind of outreach activities that communities can do early on throughout the project. Outreach starts early, not only with reaching out, with the DNR reaching out to the communities, but also the communities reaching out throughout their local government and informing everyone of the project and the changes that are coming, so that everybody's prepared for the new mapping once it becomes effective. So the Community Outreach Guidebook is one of those tools, and it's been around for quite a while. This was actually introduced with Georgia's FY 2008 project, where Georgia had over 60 communities that they needed to map and issue effective within just a couple of years. And with the volume of mapping in communities, they needed a way to supplement and get the information into the community's hands so that the communities could do more outreach on their own. So this used to be a hard binder. We would print out multiple copies and carry them around to all the PDCC meetings. It has now evolved into this digital product, and we're leveraging Esri's story map technology as a way to migrate this into a interactive digital product. So I'm just going to walk through a couple of the different pages of this, or pieces of it. It's laid out by the risk map project phases. And then within each phase, there's some tabs about what happens during that phase, activities that Georgia DNR may be doing or FEMA doing, outreach activities that the communities can be doing during that particular phase. And then of course, resource documents, handouts, and templates that the communities can use that are pertinent to each of those phases of the project.
Another new initiative that the Georgia DNR is doing is the hydrology and hydraulics review. During the data development phase, we meet with the Georgia DNR to go over the study results. First, once we have finished the hydrology, we meet with the Georgia DNR. We have a first meeting to go over the results and to go over any significant changes. Once the Georgia DNR has reviewed and approved those results, we issue a report that is sent to the communities. After sending that report to the communities, floodplain mapping administrator and community engineer, we follow up with a phone call, make sure they have all the answers, they have understood our reports. Once everything is approved and reviewed by the Georgia DNR, we move into our hydraulics. When that is all done, a few months later, we have a second review with the Georgia DNR. Again, go over all the methodology and any special situations that we find, address any problems at that point, and issue a second report and send it to the community. Okay, so let's take a look at the hydrology results report. This report is a concise and short report. It's like about 2 or 3 pages. It's very simple, and it's designed, it's not for an engineer, it's for the community officials to understand the hydrology methodology and results. The report contains the hydrology methodology, so we go down a list stream by stream, explaining what method was used, regression equations, gauge, rainfall runoff, something like that. Then we have a nice little map, a scope map. Consider that these reports are made by, by county, per county. So it is just a county map that shows what streams are being studied and what methods are being applied to each stream. Then we have a nice summary of discharges table, and you can go in and find the discharges for any of the streams being studied. And then at the end, we include a graph that compares the new results with effective and compared to regression equations. This is a great graph to identify major increases or decreases in flow. It is also a great opportunity for communities that if they have any historic information, that we can start comparing and making sure we have included all the information available. Next. Now the hydraulics report is very similar. It's a few pages long. It has a nice map. Again, it shows what's going to be mapped as approximate zone A or detailed zone AE, and what methods were used to study each of the streams. It includes a graph showing water surface elevation increases and decreases, and you can see if increases are significant or decreases are significant. We can easily identify them, and we also find the effective profile, the new profile from the HECRAS model, and the mapping, and include all of that information in the report, so the communities are aware of areas that will be changed significantly. One more thing that we have included in our hydraulics memo is a link to a web viewer, map viewer, where communities can start getting familiar with the new data. This is draft data at this point only, and I'll talk about this viewer in a little bit. Next. All right. Once the Georgia DNR and the communities have seen and all the H&H results, we move with the floodplain mapping and start preparing for the flood risk review meetings. For these meetings, we prepare draft maps. These are the Georgia draft maps panels. They're very nice. They contain a lot of information. We label we categorize our floodplains. Anything red is increases, anything green is decreases, anything blue is no change. We also include cross sections with water surface elevations, and if there is an effective AE zone, we include those water surface elevation as well. So it's very easy to compare what's changing. Another great thing that we are including in these draft maps is the changes in /firm statistics. We have these tables at the bottom of each of the panels that list the number of buildings and the area that have been added or removed. One table shows it per panel, and the other table shows it broken by community. But it is a great communication tool. And then last, this is our newest tool. This is the viewer I was telling you about that we use to also show the hydraulics results. During the flood risk review meeting, we also use this viewer. It lists the buildings. It has statistics like I showed you before, and community officials can access this link. This is not preliminary data yet. It's draft only, so we don't share this with the public, just with the community officials. They can go and zoom in, change the background, and they can look at buildings that have been added or removed. Next. So in this case, you can see the buildings categorized as if they're newly removed, if they have decreases or increases in SFHA, or buildings that are newly added. As you can see, this is another great communication tool for our community.
Okay, so now we've reached the final stage of the risk map process, and we're probably 2 to 3 years into the risk map project, and by now, hopefully, we've received acceptance of the engineering results from the communities and are ready to share the mapping with the public. One thing that Georgia does to prepare the communities for this public open house is to have a planning meeting in advance of the open house, and a lot of it's just to go over logistics. looking for the right facility, equipment needs, who from the community should be represented, and just kind of give them an idea of the flow and things that we want to accomplish at the open house, and kind of get them geared up and prepared. But another big component of it is, how do they want to advertise? Individual notification was introduced for Georgia many years ago with a proposed bill that was going to require individual notices based on map change. And Georgia wanted to know, what would it take to do that? And so FEMA funded a pilot project for Georgia to test out individual property notification, and it's evolved quite a bit since then, and now we've landed on these nice postcards. One of the lessons learned is that you don't want to send out letters, multiple letters, to individuals about increasing flood zones or insurance requirements. You'll have a lot of angry citizens showing up. So these postcards are pretty benign. And individual property notification definitely increases turnout at the open houses, which is what we want. So one big powerful tool or product that we've introduced to open houses are the flood risk snapshot. Now, you can generate a flood risk snapshot at any point in time. It does not have to be in an open house, but this is a good way to start the conversation with the property owners. If they have not checked out their property in advance of the open house, we have property lookup stations available for them to look up their property and see what their individualized flood risk is. This example is the flood risk snapshot at the preliminary phase of a project. So you can see that it's pretty colorful, and it matches the color scheme from the draft maps that we've shared with community officials during the hydraulics review stage of the project. But also with risk map, we have all this underlying data that we can now share with property owners. So not only are they getting a flood zone and a base flood elevation that doesn't mean that much to them, they also get a % chance of flooding over a 30-year period, and then depths of flooding on a 10%, 1%, or 0.2% event. So there's a little bit more understanding of the severity of the situation. And this also can drive what conversation needs to happen next, whether it's they want to know more about the engineering and how we've arrived at the results we have, or whether they're worried about the financial situation and insurance implications, or they want to know what the community's role is in this. And so we can kind of steer and the flow of the open house based on this tool that we use at the beginning once a property owner arrives. And this just is another example of the flood risk snapshot, but it's once a project's gone effective. So you'll see that we no longer are relying on the changes since last firm and the colorful scheme that we had going. Now it just shows the effective mapping. The flood risk snapshot is also driven by an underlying map viewer, and this is accessible for the website as well. So if you're comfortable with GIS, you can go directly to the map viewer and look at the mapping and the products that way as well. And it's also compatible with other mobile devices such as phones and tablets. Georgia also wanted to have the modeling that's being produced through the program available to the communities. Right now they're housed in 2 different areas of the website. One is a model search where you can look for models based on a county, a community, a stream name, or a HUC watershed. And the other one is a FTP-like site that houses a lot of older models from MapMod timeframe. Eventually all the models will be migrated into the model search, and then a lot of the older modeling will be superseded by new approximate base level engineering that Georgia's ramping up right now. So we've talked a lot about the website and all the tools and features that we've covered so far are accessible through the website. It's organized by property owners, community officials, and DNR program officials. And then in addition to some of the risk map related tools and resources that are there, there's other outreach resources to help with floodplain management in general or preparing for disasters. And this first one is the Floodplain Management Quick Guide. This is a very helpful guide to a floodplain manager. It helps decipher the NFIP, covers the roles and responsibilities of a floodplain manager, how a map change affects them, higher standards that they can introduce. So a really good resource there. Another is the Flood Response Toolkit, and this walks through different activities that communities can be doing in advance of a flood event, during a flood event, and then recovering from a flood event, and it also includes templated material as well. There's also a couple of best practice guidebooks, one for green space and flood protection, and another for community resiliency. And this last item we're really excited about. Georgia is standing up a data information portal, which will serve as a central repository for program-related data and information, again, providing this one-stop shop for community officials to get the information and data that they need to do their job. A couple of things that I want to feature, or a couple ones I want to feature, is the soil map viewer. This one's a basic viewer, nothing fancy about it, but what makes it special is based on an experience that Jack Kolakowski had when he was participating in a CRS audit with a community. And the auditor asked the community official if they had a soils map that could be used in helping get credits. And he said no, and Jack was like, well, we can fix that. And he knew where to get a soils map and pull it down, and then the community could say, oh, I do have a soils map, and so they could check that box. And we thought, well, if this is something that's needed for communities, why don't we just put it in one place, and Georgia can promote that some of the data that they need for CRS credits can be found on this on this site. So that was something really easy to pull together, and communities now can just check that box very easily. Another one is also related to CRS, the 400 series for floodplain mapping and regulations. A community can go to this map viewer and search their community, and then the viewer will return a bunch of statistics that they may need, such as the acreage of special flood hazard area, or the acreage of the floodway, or the area that they're regulating beyond the special flood hazard area, which a lot of Metro Atlanta communities do that. They regulate to a 3-foot horizontal freeboard. So it calculates that, and then using building footprints, we can calculate buildings that are in those different designations. So we're really excited about the different types of map viewers that we can put together, and building all this, leveraging ArcGIS Hub, and customizing a lot of different data viewers and apps using that technology.
And Georgia Communication and Outreach Plan has seen a lot of benefits. These have included engaging and informed communities, having community officials armed with tools to better serve their citizens, better positioned to address local official turnover, additional layer of quality control, progress towards a more flood risk aware and resilient state, access to property-specific flood risk information, quick dissemination data and info to broader audience, and smoother due diligence and compliance stages. And if you need any additional information or resources, you can feel free to reach out to any of us. Hayden Blaze is our NFIP coordinator for the state, myself, Shannon and Monica from Dewberry and Atkins both. And just so you can see, check out the Georgia DFIRM website under the community officials section. And there's a bunch of information right there from everything from, the guidebooks and the templates that were mentioned, as well as, the information on LOMAs. Thank you so much.
Okay, welcome back. Thanks everyone for the final Q&A of the day. I'm joined by Shannon Brewer from Dewberry, who's our session sponsor, by the way. Thank you, Dewberry. She's has her co-presenters, Emily Wingo from the Georgia Department of Natural Resources and Monica Urisco from Atkins. Thank you all for joining us. Let's go to the chat box here to see what kind of questions we have. First one is a question about the flood risk report map viewer. Is it digital or paper? And if it's digital, how do you host it and how is it funded?
So I'll take that. Good question. The map viewer is digital. We're using Esri Hub to host that, and it's made public, so anyone can actually go in and access it. But we only advertise it to the community officials at this point in time. And it's actually funded through the CTP funding. It's part of the outreach allocation.
Okay. I think there's a follow-up to that from the same person. Can you briefly explain how the data portal was developed, for example, with the platform, the stakeholders, logistics, et cetera?
Yeah, so it was developed, again, using the Esri Hub technology. And I guess I should maybe ask another question. If we're talking about the map viewer for property lookup or the map viewer for the draft data, I will say for the, I'll maybe try to answer for both of those.
Yeah.
So the map viewer for the draft map is, again, Esri Hub technology, and that was just developed by the Dewberry team with coordination with Georgia DNR. It was stood up pretty quickly, just based on past experience and some of the key changes that people are looking for when we visit the communities. The map viewer, that's part of the property lookup that creates the flood risk snapshot. That's actually getting migrated over to Esri Hub. Right now it's hosted on an internal server with customized scripting, but we're getting ready to migrate that all over so that Georgia DNR has more capability to make updates on their own, and it's a little more user-friendly to the public. But there wasn't, other than coordinating with Georgia DNR, there was not a lot of stakeholder input in developing that.
And let me add one thing. We
Sure.
do produce draft maps in paper format and PDF, and those are like the panels I showed during the presentation with the red, green, and blue colors. So that's another product on top of the viewer.
Okay. So one of the questions I had while I was watching the presentation, the postcards and some of the other printed materials that are shared with the communities and residents, have you had the need or had the request to have those translated into other languages for folks with limited English proficiency or not?
I'll take that question. At this time, we have not. We've been somewhat dependent upon our local governments and community officials to tell us what they exactly need. And so far, having a translated version of that has not come up.
Okay. If we have any other questions. Shannon, did you have any other kind of thoughts? You've worked with other CTPs and other folks in the industry. Some summary thoughts on how Georgia's program may be really unique and different from others?
Sure. I mean, I think you'll see across the board, as exemplified through a lot of the presentations I've seen today, that everybody's really heavy into outreach and has their own outreach program and kind of taste of doing it. The thing that I think makes Georgia a little different is that they're really bringing the communities in much earlier on in the process, like with the engineering and the modeling stages, and really letting them digest that information early on, and then they have more ownership over the products. So they're not just receiving something at the prelim stage and not had a lot of opportunity to weigh in and see where maybe the challenge areas might be and try to get ahead of that and work through those complexities much early on. And I think in the end, Georgia's had a good success rate with adoption of maps and low protests and appeals. And I think doing all those extra steps along the way has really led to that.
Well, thank you all for the Q&A. Sorry, I've got someone calling me over here. I believe all of our questions have been answered. So again, thanks again for a great session. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Dinner time, Louie.
Thank you.